Picture this. You send in your manuscript to your publisher as a final proof of the publication. You relax back in your chair. You look at the contents of your book, and you're reminded of all of the energies, all the experiences and the efforts that have gone into making this book. Your partner comes into the room with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses, gives you a big hug and congratulates you. And while you're feeling this euphoria of excitement and having finished this project, you realize you've actually done this. You've actually put into practice and made this dream come true. All of this hard work. You've now got a book that demonstrates that your passions are actually alive and well. And you've become a part of the community in which you live. And you are now sharing these ideas. This is the idea of writing. This is what the promise is of writing. Again, pick up on Randy's point. My name is Ian Moore. I'm a published writer, I'm a teacher, and a career coach. I've written a number of books, poetry, non-fiction, essays, short stories, and I've just finished a novel. It's just taken me literally 20 years to finish. What I want to talk to you today about is spreading the disease of literature. Now, in today's world where we have so many technological items to distract us, many people will say, literature's gone. We don't need this anymore. We need this instant world, this pulsating world where all is available at our fingertips. I want to take a pause there and remind you what it is to be a human being. A human being does one thing at a time. And they do it that way because that's what they want to learn. There's no such thing as multitasking and remembering anything. They've done tests at MIT with people who are supposedly the brightest young things coming up. After doing a number of items at one time and then getting tested on it, they can't remember anything. In order for us to remember things, we need to develop our ability to concentrate, to focus, and to reflect. The only thing that is left of us these days is literature and writing, which is an extension of that. So my thoughts are to encourage you to think in terms of that. Okay? If you really want to accomplish something, you've got to focus on it. I think you already know that. And many of the reasons that you are here is because you want to be reminded of those kind of attributes. Okay? I love writing. I love literature. I read all the time. I'm a mad collector of books. That is where I spend all of my money. I have this standard joke. People come into my room and they say, have you read all these books? And I say, no, I just had them shipped in just before you got here. People are amazed when they see people with lots of books. The idea, of course, of the books is that, well, for me anyway, they're a possession. They're babies, if you will. They're things that remind me of the stages that I've gone through in my life, how I've learned, continue to learn. And that is a thing that I'd like to encourage you to be thinking of. And this is why we probably won't ever get rid of hardback books, because it's a physical thing. It's actually there. And when we step into that arena to produce a book, we become a part of that community. When we're long dead, that book will still live. This is one of the things that is very rare in our lives. And particularly now when technology is taking over, when everything is digital or in the cloud, things don't exist anymore. They're just in somebody's mind for a half a second. A book will last. You can be picking up a book, somebody or music, a book from 100 years ago, 200 years ago, and you can still learn wisdom from that, 1,000 years ago. So that's the world that we're living in. That's what we have to remind ourselves about. Now, just in case any of you have this misconception that I've got this crazy accent from across the pond, and that somehow I managed to develop all these ideas, perhaps from an Oxbridge college education, I can assure you my life has been the complete opposite. My parents abandoned me when I was about 3 months old and sent me to a series of foster homes. I ended up in a boarding school for 10 years in London, outside of London. If you've ever read Oliver Twist, you get some idea of the situation. We actually had a situation like that where the guy comes up and says, "Please, miss, can I have some more?" We had that hot plate and we had to all line up. 10 years of that kind of concentrated uniformity does disastrous things for people. When they get it, when that happens to you when you're very young, you have to spend a long, long time dealing with that, trying to get over that. I know people who went to that school and they still not recovered. But for me, I was lucky. I had a teacher who really believed in me and told me to stop putting all my energies into the sports field, which is where I was the king, and told me to start studying and learn. And literally within a semester, I turned my whole life around. I started reading, joining debating societies, and because I had somebody that was on my side. And again, in those kind of environments, and it happens with all of us. If a parent is supportive of us, and even if they don't know what it's about, but they continue to give us that prodding, that keep that positive energy. There's no amount of sort of success that you can achieve. I think we all kind of know that, but I think we have to again remind ourselves that these qualities, these human qualities, must be reminded, must be worked at, and we must remind each other of them. So I managed to get out of school with some certifications of some kind, but the thing that really opened up my mind and my life was traveling. And from around 17, I just took to the roads, and I just hitchhiked everywhere. This was back in the 70s when it was safe. I went all over Europe. I went to the Middle East. I was in Israel. I stayed on a kibbutz for 6 months. I worked down in Eilat and helped build that place up. Well, I didn't help build it, but I worked in a lot of the places that were building there. I had some amazing experiences meeting people. And the thing with traveling, and particularly for me at that time, is that it allowed me to get out of myself and put me in a situation where my curiosity was sparked, because I had to keep that alive. I had to keep discovering what was going on around me by being in those new situations. I didn't always speak the language, and I don't know if you've ever lived in a country for 3 or 4 months and not spoke the language. It's challenging, to say the least. But you find a way to communicate with people, because there are skills and communication symbols and signals that we all give out that don't require language. So I did a lot of traveling throughout Europe, and then I came over to America. And I've been here about 30 years now. But in many ways, being here is kind of an extension of my travels. I meet lots of new people. I go to lots of different districts. I live in Oakland, and there's a multitude of people there. And I absolutely love it because of that. I don't talk to all of them, and thankfully they don't come knocking on my door all the time. But I like the diversity. So that is one of the reasons I'm kind of attracted here. But in terms of the writing skill and the writing mindset, as people who come here on a weekly basis, learning from, listening to, and learning from other people's stories and passing on and sharing your own stories, one of the things that everybody in this room should be doing is writing their story. When you write a story, I was going to use LaShawn, but I heard that he's not here now, but LaShawn has written this story. We were just talking earlier, and he was saying how he's not really a writer. He just started making notes, and the experiences that he was having in his work made him realize that he was learning a lot, his clients were learning a lot, and these lessons could be shared. And everyone here is actually engaged in that in one form or another. One of the things that it does for you, outside of the discipline that it creates in writing it down and following through and checking it, we'll talk a little bit more about that later, is that it reflects back on you, and it gives you an opportunity to reflect on your work and reflect on what it means to be in the business, concerned with the issues that you're working in. It gives that other perspective. And as you hand it out and you share it with other people who buy this book, they come back with other thoughts. And one of the first things that hit me when I put my book out, was my first book out, people come back with all kinds of reflections and perspectives on it that you have no intention of suggesting. But that's part of what happens when you put it out into the public domain. It becomes something else. It's not yours anymore. So when I produce a book, I let it loose into the world, and I'm happy to have any kind of response coming back. And as I finally learned to be a little humble with it, instead of complaining that, oh no, that wasn't what I meant, you know, you obviously missed the point. Go back and read it again. You know, these are not textbooks where you're going to be have an exam on them. We are sharing our ideas. Some of the ideas you're going to take, some of them you're not. And that's just part of the flow of it all, of exchanging ideas. So again, I'd like to urge you all to think about putting down your notes, putting down the experiences you have, and beginning to compile them as a book. The first book that I wrote was basically essays. And every day, all the different places I went to, I'd write these little stories about situations that happened. Then I'd put it away. Maybe it would be a year later before I got it together. I put it together with something else. Writing is an ongoing process. Again, one of the main reasons for it is that it gives you that third party to reflect back on what you're doing. But at the same time, you're actually creating something as you move forward. Okay? So, I'd like to urge everybody to really think about that and start doing that. Some of the, I have just a couple of points in terms of some ideas about writing that I'd like to, 3 points about reading and writing. First, in order to write, you must read. It is not enough to just sit there and just sort of start scribbling around. You need to read as much as possible. Not just for the enjoyment of it or for the knowledge of it, but also to understand how that individual puts their sentences together, how they convey, how they evoke the ideas that touch you. Because you're going to want to do this yourself. And you're going to learn very quickly that you cannot tell people what to do in a book or tell a story. You need to evoke, you need to connect with them. Okay? So one of the questions I'd like to ask everybody, what is the difference between somebody who reads and somebody who cannot read? What is the difference between somebody who does not read and somebody who cannot read? Anybody?
Their whole scope and view of the world is different.
Who? Which one?
The one that reads has so much more opportunity, and the one that...
All right, let me rephrase that. I wasn't clear. What is the difference between somebody who can read but doesn't read and somebody who cannot read? What is the difference between those two passages?
Someone can take meaning from a piece of paper and as close to someone else.
Are you suggesting that there's no difference?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. If you can read, yes, but you don't read, except for little text messages or magazine articles or the headlines of the latest trivia and disaster, and somebody who doesn't even bother to read, there is no difference between them. Because reading requires focused attention. And you can try this yourself. Don't read for a month. Don't read anything for a month, or at least a novel. Don't read a novel for at least a month, okay? And then pick up the first novel that comes in hand and try to read it. I guarantee you'll be lucky if you can get through one page. Because our brains and the ability to focus like that is just like a muscle in our arm. It will atrophy. If we do not use it, we lose it. All of these characteristics about ourselves as human beings need to be cultivated. We constantly talk about exercise, we constantly talk about going, running, and this and that. That is not just because it looks cool. It's because the body needs that exercise to function as a fully fledged human being. If we're going to be in a world where we're thinking about things, we need to exercise our brains. And reading, and particularly writing, assists with that. Okay? All right. We're going to have some time for some questions, so I'm going to just skip to the end. A book I want to recommend, I have no investment in this book, I just like to say. This is if you are going to write, this is the best reference book in the whole world. It can cost you about $2. You can sometimes get it in a store for $1. It has everything that you need to know about grammar, sentence structures, everything, what works and what doesn't work. This is the Bible for writing, and I highly recommend you get this. Just have it on your desk and just thumb through it from time to time. It's basically The Elements of Style. The Elements of Style by E.B. White. This is an updated version, but this is the guy that originally did it. Okay? Highly recommend. Again, reading requires that you practice reading. If you want to write, you need to read and write daily. Have a diary, not a text message machine, but a diary that you can actually look back on and look at and see what is said. Imagine, if you can, writing to your grandmother. You're explaining what happened today. Do it in some way. Use some poetry. When I say poetry, I don't mean it has to arrive at the end. Put feeling into it. Explain it in a way that the words themselves, the combination of the words, makes you feel good just reading them. This is the beauty of literature that you can't get out of in the videos and that kind of thing. Okay? The third point about literature is that you need to build your confidence to review and to rewrite and to improve. It is one of the few things that we have to really be honest with ourselves over and know when something is not working, and work it again and work it again until it is the very best you can do at this point. That in itself builds the muscles of concentration and confidence in yourself. So, I'd just like to end with a poem, kind of a cheeky poem, I guess. But first, a saying from Ernest Hemingway, who is currently my favorite writer. I have different favorite writers every month, but he's my one for this month. And he writes, "A writer must write what he or she says, not say it." Okay? So it's important to write down what you think. And I've taken this to heart because I used to tell my wife all my stories. I said, well, just write it down, just write it down. I don't need to hear all this. And I finally got the message and began to write them down. And when you are writing down your ideas, they start to blossom. Because language in itself is pretty limited. When you sit down, one of the beauties of writing is that you can really blossom it out. You can imagine all sorts of different things. Whereas if I started telling you an imaginary story, you just think I was over my head. Okay. So, let's write what you have to say, not talk about it. And in due course, then, I will say no more, and I would like to read a poem called True Love. There's the wonderful love of a beautiful maid, and the love of a staunch true man, and the love of a baby that's unafraid, all have existed since time began. But the most wonderful love, the love of all loves, even greater than the love of mother, is the infinite, passionate, tenderest love of one dead drunk for another. So any questions?
Questions, anybody? Come on, there's got to be some fledgling writers like myself who are dying to ask something. Or who left their phone on.
I have no question, I just thought it was wonderful, everything you said.
Thank you very much.
And I like the tone of your voice
Yeah.
and your delivery.
Thank you very much. I had all these prepared notes. This is sorry.
So the teacher who had such an influence on you, what subject did that person teach?
It wasn't. He was actually my geography teacher. We don't teach geography now, but I don't know why. It's a fabulous subject. But he, I think it was just that he gave. You know, I lived in a school of like 300 kids, right? And you know, I got by because I was very good at sport, and and when I actually think about the time, then I actually had a good time. It was only afterwards I realized what they'd done to me, you know, because I kind of locked down, kind of thing. You know, it's like the crazy people in the manor house. While you're in there, it's fine. You know, you think, great, this is really great. You know, you get food and you get your clothes and everything. But when you leave, you suddenly realize, goodness, I could have been doing all this other stuff, you know. But then I might have been a criminal, so you know, I was safe from that. But he just said, you can do better. You can just do better. And he just would not tolerate me kind of being lazy, not finishing my work. And again, this is a kind of a message for all of our own kids. We need to give them that love and attention, but we need to keep reminding them, hey, you can do better than this, you know. Why are you messing up your life? You know, I mean, I tell my kid, I said, I'm all right, I've got a house, I got a car, you know. You want a car? You want a house? Finish your work, you know, finish your work. Do it, you know, get through to it, you know. So, I'm actually a teacher now, and I teach English as a second language, and I teach a lot of, you know, adults. And it's one way for me to repay what my teacher did. Unfortunately, I was able to contact him before he passed away, and actually thank him, because, you know, a lot of times you go through life and you, people do help you, and then years later you think, oh God, you know, Mr. So-and-so, you know, what happened? You know, he really was there for me, you know. But when you reach that point of consciousness, which is what, 50, 55 now?
Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
You were writing a book, you said, that you were finishing up your book 20 years ago.
Yes.
Well, what's the most important thing that comes out of that?
Well, you know, there's a lot of things. There wasn't one thing. There's a whole bunch of things. I've been writing all kinds of stories, primarily about my experiences at culture shock, coming here and going to different places. But then I realized that when you talk just about yourself all the time, it becomes a bit boring. You know, I went here and I went there. No matter how wonderful the place might be, it's a bit tedious to be reading. And I had to read this stuff myself, you know, to figure out everything. So, literature and novels or fiction allows you to invent stuff, invent characters, and composite characters. So I did that. So that was interesting. For me, it was getting the name right. And I worked a long time just getting the name. Even now, I write a lot of short stories, and that first topic sentence is always the thing that I have the hardest with. It's not hard. I enjoy the process. So I go and walk around, play with my dogs, and I think, you know, is it the name of, is it John did this, or I came in, and I come up with a line. And it's the same in poetry too. You may have an idea of where you want to go with the poem or the story, but you want to get a good start. And so you have to sort of play around with the feelings that you want to conjure up. So in terms of this novel, it was a huge adventure. And I finally sat down in the summer and spent 3 months just doggedly writing, rewriting. Fortunately, I had a very good editor who just kept throwing it back at me and making me work it out and making me make sense of this thing. Because a novel of 300 pages gets unwieldy after a while. You know, you forget that where they were the month before, and particularly as I had situations of jumping back and forth. To answer it in one way, I would say persistence. That was the thing I really got out of it. And I finally sat down and said, all right, I'm going to finish this thing. So if there was one aspect that came out that I will always have, and now I know I can do that. This is the thing I was mentioning about writing. Once you've done it that first time, you know you can do it. It's no longer, oh God, I gotta write this book, it's just so hard, It's, hey, I did it before. You know, no, just, you know, be kind to yourself, don't beat yourself up, work at it, you know, bit by bit. And so there's a persistence and determination to get it done. Now, of course, I'm faced with marketing, and which I hate. So anybody got any ideas about marketing a book? I'm very much down with my feet, I'm just exhausted.
Of the books you've written, do you have a favorite? If so, why?
The last one, the latest one, you know. And now I'm actually writing short stories, and I absolutely love them. You know, I love that short story format. I can tell that whole thing. I used to write a lot of poetry, and it's longer than a poem, and it's shorter than a novel. It's fabulous. And given the short attention span of people that do get around to reading, you know, 2.5 pages, 1,000 words, 2,000 words, piece of cake. 10 minutes, 15 minutes, they can read this thing. Well, I did my reading for the week, you know, and get back to their computers.
Very good. One last question.
Yes, you were talking about the continuous exercise to read, otherwise you lose the ability of this skill. Now, I'm a little bit more on the technical side. So, is the technical reading, does that qualify me? Or should I read all your books? Or
Absolutely. The second point. Start with the, no, technical reading is essential in our world. If you can master reading it online and that kind of thing, that is a necessary skill, because there's a tremendous amount of information that's coming out. I recommend reading some poetry and non-fiction and fiction books to break away from that and to give yourself a sense of humanity, because technical writing, by its very nature, is about a particular thing, and they want you to get this thing. They don't want you to think about it. They want you to get this idea, and that's important. But I believe, and I used to be an engineer, and I did a lot of reading specifications and applying them. By reading by reading fiction and allowing myself over to that, it made it. I could enjoy the technical writing. It wasn't so intense. So I would recommend it in that context. But don't give up technical writing, because again, if you're in that industry, it's very important to be doing that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
There have been a few of you who got here early